What's up, everybody? This is Mr. Second Passport. Today we're going to cover the 4 biggest social issues that are facing America right now, the U.S., and why Ecuador doesn't have a problem with any of them. So let's take a look. Right, the number one listed social issue facing America these days is obviously, and it's no surprise, social and political division, right? Whether you're left or right, I don't think anyone can argue that there's quite a bit of conflictiveness and division in America these days, and especially racial division and a whole bunch of nasty social division going on. Whereas, here in Ecuador, you don't really have that. Like, every 5 years you have an election in Ecuador. They campaign about a month before, and then there's like 50 different political parties here, and then there's the election and it's over, and then everyone kind of moves on, and people just aren't that political here. I mean, there's some extremes like everywhere, but it's really not that big a deal, right? The second social issue that I read, second biggest issue facing America these days, according to this article I read, is lack of affordable housing, and it's going up, up, up. And you could probably right now group inflation in with this as well. Inflation's going crazy in the U.S. right now, and even homelessness is obviously on the rise as well, and a big issue. Whereas here in Ecuador, you don't really have problems with any of this. You don't see that many homeless people. In the big cities, obviously, like everywhere in the world, you'll have some, but it's not a huge thing. It's not a very popular. It's not a very common thing to see here, right? And the government down here has kind of capped, for now at least, inflation, believe it or not, by capping the energy prices, which is what they've done for the last 10 or 20 years, right? A bus ticket in Quito was 25 cents when I first came as a backpacker, like over 15 years ago, and now they just bumped it up to 35 cents like a month or two ago. And it was a big deal. So as you can see, like, they've been able to kind of keep inflation under check down here in Ecuador. As far as available affordable housing, there's a lot in Ecuador. If you follow this channel, like I just showed you one little suite that I rent on the outskirts of Quito for $80 a month. Kind of a studio. It's kind of a big room with a little kitchenette and a bathroom to it. But I mean, that's just an example of livable, affordable housing that exists plentifully here in Ecuador. And it's even cheaper when you go out to different cities and the more the country and rurals in areas in Ecuador. Right. The third issue, the article listed, the social issue affecting America these days, or I should say the U.S., was lack of affordable health care. Right? And down here in Ecuador, you don't really have that problem either, because you have quite a few inexpensive options. Like, I personally pay, that I've covered on this channel, a private plan where I pay about $35 a month for me and my wife. Covers both of us for that one price. There's also public care that's open to anyone. They can't refuse you. Kind of backed by the government, the ES it's called, which costs around 60 to 80 a month as well. And that's good if you think you're going to need a lot of serious health care. I had a friend who survived a heart bypass with the ES insurance, and the doctor told him, "Hey, you're pretty lucky you had this insurance. In the U.S., it would have cost $60,000 to $80,000, right? The procedure that he had." And so yeah, and then there's also free public hospitals that anyone can go to in a pinch. And yes, I've been to them myself as well, and they're not that bad. They're not that bad. The care is pretty decent. I had my one and only daughter in a free public hospital because it was the closest to me. The private clinics would have charged around $800 to have a kid, so I didn't see the point. And so anyway, Ecuador doesn't really have that problem much either. And the fourth and final biggest social issue listed in the article I read was obviously pretty obvious: gun violence and the mass shootings. They just seem to be becoming more and more and more common. And now, just the other day, there was a guy who drove a van through a parade in Wisconsin. You don't see that level of violence, and particularly gun violence, in Ecuador. I hate to say it, but primarily because guns are illegal, right? So what happens when guns are illegal? I mean, there's what people think is going to happen, that only the bad guys are going to have guns, and then there's what kind of really happens, and that is gun prices go way up, and the common criminal can't afford guns anymore, so they don't have them, right? And you'll probably get robbed, like with a knife that you can run from, which has happened to me here in Quito. I was robbed by two guys with knives that I just ran from and escaped. The one and only time I've been robbed here in Ecuador, rather violently. So I mean, Ecuador, I hate to say it, doesn't really have this social issue either. Obviously, probably the biggest issue and why a lot of people leave Ecuador for other countries is unemployment or underemployment, right? So that is, so that's an issue that's facing Ecuador still to this day. For me, the second biggest social issue that Ecuador is facing right now is obviously the narcos, and the whole drug trade is coming up since the previous president, actually 2 presidents ago now. About 6 or so years ago, the president at the time, Rafael Correa, kicked out the American base out of Manta, and since then, both Colombia and Peru have been funneling more and more their drugs through Ecuador to the world, right? Just because the controls just don't seem to be as strict and more corrupted. Right, so that's an issue, obviously, that's Ecuador is starting to face, especially over the last few years, that I think is something they're going to have to take care of. Right, the third biggest issue, social issue that I think is facing Ecuador right now as we speak, entering 2022, is water and air quality still has issues, right? A lot of companies, because they just dump their waste into the nearest river or whatever, and there's just lacking control, right? Of the situation, and it's an issue. And air quality, supposedly there are e-checks on and emissions checks on vehicles, but you still are walking in the street, and it's pretty common to a big black cloud of smoke will engulf you as a bus drives past you in the street in one of the big cities in Ecuador. So obviously these are issues that I still think Ecuador needs to work on. I would say the number 4 issue, social issue affecting Ecuador right now, as far as the biggest goes, in top 4, would be probably lack of justice. And what I mean by that, or lack of accountability, particularly for the rich, and people know this, and that's why they act a fool sometimes. Rich people can kind of do whatever they want, and they know by paying the right people or whatever, they can still get off, right? So for me, there's a little bit of a lack of a justice system that kind of works for everyone here in Ecuador, and that's an issue as well when you're living here. When you're just visiting as a tourist, you probably won't even feel it. But these are the 4 biggest social issues I've seen that's facing Ecuador right now, in my opinion. If you have a different opinion, go ahead and leave it in the description, in the comments below.